Well, thank you all for joining me and sharing some more information on NEABPD and the programs that you offer. So I will start with, I'm Kim Vay. I'm the president of the DBT-LBC, DBT Linehan Board of Certification. And my intent here and my goal is to really get the word out on what y'all do and the amazing work that you do. I've seen it firsthand with the clients that I serve and their families. And so I'm gonna, ask you all a few questions and be able to just give you the platform to really share the work that you do. So let me first have you introduce with Abby. You want to introduce yourself, and then we'll do some introductions, and then we'll get into some of the good parts of what y'all do.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. I'm Abby Ingber. I'm the Executive Director of the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder. I live in Northern New Jersey, and I'm happy to be with you. I'm happy to be with you here today.
My name is Krista Cox. I am a parent of a 23-year-old and a 17-year-old with emotional dysregulation. I have been through the Family Connections program and the Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery programs, and am also a leader for the Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery program.
And I'm Brian Stacy. I'm joining from Northern California. I am a Family Connections leader, and I've led about 6 classes at this point. I am the father of a 32-year-old female.
Maybe to start, Abby, do you want to share just a brief history of NEABPD?
Happy to. So, the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder was created about 24 years ago by a clinician and researcher who saw the need to raise awareness and promote borderline personality disorder. She worked with a group of three other people who were clinicians and family members. And they initially started out providing conferences, education, seminars, trainings where they brought together people with lived experience, family members, researchers, and clinicians to all work together, learn from each other on borderline personality disorder. Shortly after our founding, Dr. Alan Frazzetti and Dr. Perry Huffman were introduced by Marsha Linehan, and the two of them started working on a curriculum to help family members reduce their grief, reduce their burden, reduce their stress, and empower them with skills. They both had saw the benefit of incorporating family members into treatment with their patients who had borderline personality disorder. They applied for a grant through the National Institute of Mental Health, and together they created a program which is now known as Family Connections. Initially, their idea was that they were each going to offer the program within their own communities and for their patients. And as they started speaking around at conferences and more people became aware of the program, everybody wanted to be able to offer it. And they gifted the program to us, the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder, for us to be able to disseminate it. We currently offer it throughout the United States and worldwide. We are in 28 countries.
Yeah, I did not know that. I did not know you were in 28 countries. And what are the ages that I guess, is there an age of a child, your child, to be able to be a part of the program?
So, the Family Connections program is for anyone who has a loved one with borderline personality disorder or chronic emotion dysregulation. It does not have to be just for parents. We have siblings, we have spouses, we have grandparents, we have aunts, we have uncles, we have a whole wide range of people, spouses, partners who take the program. In order to participate in the program, you do need to be over 18 years of age, and your loved one needs to be over 13 years old.
Okay.
And this is because the skills would be different with younger children than they are with someone who is 13 years old and older.
Okay. And you made an important part there that I wanted to clarify and highlight, that the loved one doesn't have to have an official borderline personality disorder diagnosis, correct?
That is correct. Many people, as many of you may be aware, do not get a diagnosis of
Exactly.
borderline personality disorder. So we really offer our programs to anybody who has a loved one who has any trait of borderline personality disorder or chronic emotion dysregulation. It can be one trait of borderline personality disorder, and the program is still helpful and beneficial.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. And there's in the two programs here, the Family Connections and the Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery, I want to talk a little bit more about also. And I think, Brian, you are a part of the Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery, and both of you are, or is Krista, that's you?
Krista's
Yes.
both. Krista's
Krista's
both.
both.
Brian is
Brian's
just
Family Connections. Okay. So let's start with Family Connections. What can you share maybe what your experience is with Family Connections and where you find it to be beneficial, maybe even personally, and with the members that you're working with?
Yeah, so oh gosh, my situation with my loved one spans over 10 years, and I probably ran into family connections around the fifth or sixth year. Um, and it was life-changing for me. When I found out that there was opportunity to lead classes, and I should say co-lead, I have co-leaders. Um, I jumped at it initially because I thought, what better way to learn something? And since we teach skills, to learn the skills by teaching them. Um, so my subsequent um, experience, signing up for more classes was, I would say, arguably in my own self-interest. It wasn't necessarily to do good in the world. But it turned out to be a wonderful mix of both, is that you got to practice these skills in preparation for leading the classes, running into all sorts of experiences with people with different situations. We would have people in our class that had younger children. I had an adult child at that point, could be brothers, sisters, spouses, and parents. Um, being able to look at the family connections, the DBT skills from lots of different angles was phenomenal resource for me. And then we were rewarded at the end of every class when people would just, all the surveys, we'd review the survey results and see what a significant impact we were helping other people achieve through those skills. So very rewarding, both personally and you know, and also just in general.
And it sounds like it provides hope, right? It's a
Tremendous.
big piece of it. I think, I'm sure you see a lot of family members come in with maybe a loss of hope or like, where do we go from here? And it providing hope in that space where there's also connection.
Yeah. Well, I forget what phrase I used, but I've used this before, but being in my 50s, it was when I was first experiencing this with my daughter, I said it was like never in my life before had I um, run into anything that I didn't understand. I was in desperate need of help. Uh, to deal with it. There was nothing in my life I cared more about than addressing those issues. And NEABPD was, fundamental to that, turning it around. I'm fortunate now. My daughter is doing really, really well. She's been out on her own for almost a year and a half. So, we've made some progress. We've had some setbacks, but most important is what I wanted. It was a healthy relationship with my adult child daughter, and I have that.
Mhm. And I think also it sounds like the program offers a bit of like the transactional effect, right? Like when you learn the skills and when you understand and get that education, then it might help like bridge the gap a little bit with what your loved one is struggling with. And so being able to learn the skills and practice the skills so that you can better communicate and have a better relationship. And it's not just always about the child or the loved one getting the help, right? Like having both, having it being more of a familial system approach as opposed to an identified patient approach.
Mm. Yeah, well, we tend to work really hard not to come across like we have patience.
I'm sorry. Okay,
You
yeah.
know, we could sound like that at certain times,
Yes.
but we emphasize that we are people who share this experience and can share the skills. We're just a little bit farther down the road with
Mhm.
having those skills. And I'll also tell you, as a manager of people at work, it also has some other
Yes. There
key
are definitely
skills.
secondary benefits to learning
Right.
DBT in life, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
going to the
Just
grocery store.
just managing my own stress, or
Yes,
anytime I drive a car.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about what the structure of the Family Connections is? The structure of the group and what that looks like?
Yeah, so I mean, typically the courses run, correct me if I'm wrong, Abby, but like 12 weeks. We've experimented with some shorter class times, and but I've taught both times that way. Usually, our experience has been like 2 hour sessions with people all over the world, time zones. We've had people from Iraq, and and they're traveling to the east, and they make sure that they have, that they can still join the sessions, because they're really, I shouldn't say sessions, the classes, because they're really engaged with it. Um, there's some self-study. There's some practices that we give them, homework, if you will. We try to stay away from that term, but we might usually start a meeting with a check-in period where people talk about their experiences really briefly, and then they assess themselves in terms of, on a 1 to 10 scale, in terms of how much anxiety they're feeling at that point, and kind of what the reason is. And that just gives us a clue in terms of how we can address them in the course of the 2 hours that we're going to spend together. Um, Sometimes we wouldn't push anybody to necessarily to share if they weren't feeling up for it. And we obviously also want to avoid kind of revisiting trauma for the group as a whole, or for any of them individually. And then we'll go through um, the lessons that they have been provided prior to that, go through the workbook, and then hopefully leave plenty of time for some interaction, some sharing, some clarification, things like that.
So, what advice would you give maybe a loved one, family member that is hesitant and is maybe anxious about sharing or anxious about what are people going to think or am I going to be judged? Like, what advice would you give somebody who's maybe more on the side of like, what are they going to think of me? Or how are they going to judge me as a parent, right? Like I hear that a lot
Yeah.
of, but what are they going to think? They're going to think that I caused this or that I should have done something different. And I think that if you could speak on any advice you have for that.
Yeah, well, there's no advice needed. It's what happens is when people start to share the same experience I had, which is like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in the world. These people, I used to run around. Thankfully, we have really good friends, but before NEABPD, I was desperate to talk to people. Like, you wouldn't believe what happened. Look what happened, and I thought I was unique in the world. And when you get into a group session like that and you hear people share their experiences, you recognize the commonality across, the spectrum of behaviors that are common across the disorder, and that you're not alone. And it can give you a lot of hope that uh, with these skills can make a difference. That um, you know they there's empirical proof that it decreased burden and guilt on there. So the question that you asked really hasn't been a problem at
Okay.
all. I think uh, it, worst case, it would take no more than 2 sessions for anyone
Sounds
to
like the
realize
class
I'm in the
dynamic
right
actually
place.
addresses it,
Yeah.
right? Like the dynamics of the class and the structure of the class actually addresses the hesitation that you may be coming in with, or the judgment thoughts you may be thinking others have or that you have. It sounds like the dynamic and the structure sort of addresses that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would love to jump in on that if that's
Yeah,
okay.
please.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, I think that one of the most difficult experiences for me with having family members with emotional dysregulation is how often in the world people ask you to talk about your kids and my neighbors and my coworkers, and I don't have relationships with everybody that I want to tell them the truth, right? And so it's a thing that's constantly poked, how isolated you are in this, or how isolated you feel in this experience. And I think one of the things about the Family Connections program and the Managing Suicidality program is, part of what creates this atmosphere where sharing feels safe is that the leaders are often people who have had these same experiences, and they're often sharing their own experiences, right? And yeah, and often, in my experience, they're people who are kind of on the other side of learning some of these skills. They've been through the same programs, they've developed these skills, they've had lots of time to practice them, and their relationships have improved as a result. And so just seeing someone say, I went through this, here's where I am now. It's not perfect. I learning these skills, I practice them every day, but it allows people to feel safe in that space. You don't feel the same way that you feel with your neighbor or your coworker. You feel like you're in, a family of people who have been through the same thing.
So it's not theoretical, right? It's more of a personal
Exactly.
experience as opposed to a theoretical experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, and most of the participants report that they miss, they're looking forward to the class and that they don't like the idea of it ending, you know. And I would also just comment, you use the word structure, and I think that's the other thing about being a leader of Family Connections is that the content and the organization of the course is structured so well. And it just relieves you from the burden of trying to figure out what am I going to say today? I literally have a good script for it. And that script is uniform and consistent across all the classes. And therefore, can produce the results that it does.
Mhm. Yeah, good. Anything else that you would like to add about the Family Connections program that would be helpful for anybody considering it, or even clinicians referring to it, right? Clinicians talking to their clients, family members, or siblings, or anybody that, anything else you would like to add about that?
I would love to if to start. You had kind of touched on this a moment ago, Kim. But just to elaborate, so my kids did not go through DBT. They are still struggling with emotional dysregulation. Um, I went through it, and the difference in my relationship, in the dynamic between myself and my children, changed dramatically just because I learned the skills. They didn't have to, right? And so, our relationship improved. I was able to learn how to help my kids regulate themselves in ways that I had actually been, making it worse before without realizing it. And so I think that that's a really beautiful part of it where I don't have to try to change them. I don't have to try to get them on board with what I'm doing. I can do it all by myself, and it does make a big difference.
Hmm, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, and I think, that's one of the big revelations that it takes a while for our participants to appreciate. It certainly did for me. When I had first met, I was able to work with my daughter's counselor after he fired her because she didn't show up for appointments. So, I remember when he said, there's nothing you could do about it. You can only change you. And I was just like, what are you talking about? She's got to clean up her act. There, there's nothing wrong with me. So I recognize that too in the first few classes for a lot of participants. They're like, what are you talking about? What I can do? What do I have to do? And that's a real turning point when people start to realize that it's out of their control and they can only change what they do.
And I can imagine as a parent that provides hope also, right? Because now I have control, I can do something, whereas very helpless feeling of, like Krista, you said you might have been making things worse or things aren't getting better. And that's a very helpless feeling where like not natural to what a parent should do or feels like is part of their role.
Yeah, and I think especially the managing suicidality class for me, um, it's never easy to be okay when your loved one is struggling, right? We take on a lot of that to ourselves. But I did learn ways to be more okay, right? And and gained permission to be more okay, even when my family members were struggling. And so it really gave me the ability to have a life that wasn't completely dependent on whether or not my kids changed and whether or not my kids developed the skills that they're going to need to succeed in the world. And so that it gave me a kind of freedom that I hadn't been able to find anywhere else.
It's like being okay, not being okay.
Yes,
Right? Like being okay with not being okay. It's like a really liberating place to get to, right? Like having that. So let's move to that, the Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery Program. And that's a newer program to my knowledge, correct? Newer, I
Yes.
don't know.
Yes. So the pilots were done in 2019, 18, 2019, and we started offering the program in 2022.
Okay. Okay. Um, and it feels like pre-pandemic feels like long time ago or not a long time ago, depending on the day. So Krista, do you want to can you share a little bit about maybe your story and your what got you and how this has impacted and been transformative for you, and then a little bit about that program for both clinicians and family members that may benefit from it.
absolutely. So I have a 17-year-old who has struggled with emotional dysregulation for a long time. Did officially receive a BPD diagnosis at one point a few years ago, even though it's pretty controversial to diagnose under 18. Um, the positive side of having received that diagnosis is it made me Google BPD. And one of the things that came up was NEABPD. And I immediately signed up for the Family Connections program, got on that waiting list. Um, the situation was incredibly dramatic. There was always something big happening. There was not just emotional, you know, turbulence in the household. There was self-harm, there was substance abuse, there was really risky decision making, and I was overwhelmed a lot. By the time I joined the Family Connections program, um, my child had attempted suicide multiple times, and I was completely dissociated by that time. The amount of complex grief that just kept building on, the thing after thing kept happening, and I just kind of had shut down. I had stopped feeling feelings at all, and I was just trying to make it through every day. I joined the Family Connections program. I did find the skills really valuable. About halfway through, I still was feeling so dissociated. I talked to one of the leaders and I said, I'm really struggling on a personal level. I want to feel like I'm a person again. And she directed me to the Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery program. She said, there's a weekend intensive. It's just a 2-day program coming up. I'd recommend that you give that a shot. And one of the differences, so there's a lot of overlap between the two programs. They teach similar skills. The Managing Suicidality program, though, is focused more on helping you process the trauma and the grief that comes with experiencing a loved one attempting suicide. And so I went to the weekend intensive, and the skill that helped me the most was just this idea of the way of processing grief that was presented. Um, Acknowledging the fact that it's also traumatic for loved ones when the child attempts suicide, right? And that we hold that, and often we're so focused on helping our loved ones get better, we don't focus on ourselves. We're not able to take care of ourselves. We're not able to, take the time and energy to do the processing that we need to do. And so it took time and it took practice. But within a few months after, I finished the Managing Suicidality class, I finished Family Connections, and within a few months I started feeling again. And it was especially profound because I was in therapy. I've done lots of therapy. I'm a strong believer. And so, it's not that I wasn't trying to get better. It was that for whatever reason, this class gave me the connection with other people going through the similar things. It gave me specific skills. It gave me permission. It taught me how to radically accept what was going on and stop trying so hard to control every little thing that wasn't mine to control. And I haven't, things have, remained challenging. My loved one is still really struggling and not quite where they need to be succeeding, but I've been okay. I haven't gone back to that level of depression and grief and checking out of life. And so that's improved our relationship dramatically. You know, I don't remember the last time my child unloaded on me, right? They still unload, but it's like to me, not at me, which is
Hmm.
profound difference. And so after that experience, because it was so transformative and so important for me, I did go through the training to be a managing suicidality breakout leader. So I've done that a few times, and I'm getting ready to learn how to be a family connections and an MSTR uh, program leader as well in the near future. Um, you asked about the structure of managing suicidality,
Yeah.
basically how that's set up. So it's similar to the Family Connections class. Managing Suicidality class is usually an 8-week program. It does tend to have more people involved, more attendees than the Family Connections class, which are usually smaller groups. So the way that it usually is happening is there is usually a clinician and another group leader together. Often the other group leader is someone who's got lived experience. And then so there's kind of large group presentation where they talk about the ideas and the philosophy and the skills. And then there's breakout rooms where you go and you're with the same group of other parents every week so that you kind of are able to build a relationship with a small group of people. You don't have to feel like you're sharing to 100 people or whatever. And so the skills, over the 8 weeks, they build on themselves and you practice and so that's the way that one works. And there's also a weekend intensive offered, which it's the same thing, but kind of packed into a weekend, which is really great for people who can't necessarily commit to once a week for eight
So it's
weeks.
one or the other. It's like if you could do the intensive or the 8 weeks, it's not both, right? Like they're both the
It's
same, they're just packaged
that's
differently.
that's right.
How about do people do both family connections and sorry, that's like a mouthful, the managing suicidality and trauma recovery. Or do they do both of the programs, or is it usually which one is best fit for what their needs are?
You can do both. I did do both. There is some overlap, but I think it depends on, what you're dealing with, what your experience is. I think also because they're skills, it's not one and done. And so it can be really beneficial to just have the additional opportunities to practice the skills and ask more questions about, specific instances. And um, so,
The
yes,
majority of people do qualify for both, but not everybody. So, with the Family Connections program, you qualify if you have a loved one with chronic emotion dysregulation or one or two or more symptoms of borderline personality disorder. With the Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery program, it is focused on parents, parents who have a child or an adult child who has suicidal ideations, has attempted suicide, has severe self-harm. And the aspect about the Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery program, which is a little bit different, the majority of parents who take the program and find it beneficial, they may not realize it, but they themselves have trauma from their child's suicide attempt or suicidal thoughts. There was a study that has not been published yet, but was done, I believe, in about 2017 that showed that 50% of parents whose child has attempted suicide, the parent has qualifies for PTSD, and I believe it's 80% of the parents qualify for acute stress, having acute stress disorder. So that's how this program came to be. Looking at those results and that report, we realized that we needed to take action and to provide support to the family members and to the parents who were themselves struggling, even though they may have not realized it. So both of the programs have the premise of putting your own oxygen mask on first
Mhm.
and managing suicidality and trauma recovery. The entire focus of the program is putting your oxygen mask on and the fear conditioning. So it's the skills through those two lenses. We have a lot of parents who will come to us, with managing suicidality and trauma recovery program. The suicide attempt could have been 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and they have removed their child's bedroom door and are still sleeping outside of the bedroom because of the fear that they have. Um, Even if in this moment their child is okay, they have
Mhm.
that fear. They won't drive past the supermarket that they were at when they got the phone call that their child was being rushed to the hospital. So the program is structured around that fear conditioning. How can we get you to drive past that supermarket? How can we get you to not be sitting outside your loved one's door and to take care of yourself so that you then in turn can take care of your loved one in a way that is appropriate
And
and
it sounds
healthy?
like both these programs sort of give a permission structure to just take care of yourself, right? Which isn't really thought of when your loved one is going through something, right? Like you're not part of the equation in terms of your own self-care or your own needs. So what happens after the program at the end of the 8 weeks or the end of the 12 weeks?
So we have a Family Connections Alumni Institute, which is open to people who have graduated from either program. There's ongoing workshops, ongoing talks. We have a Facebook page for people to continue learning and staying educated and practicing their skills. We recognize that the skills that we're teaching are not one and done. You have to intentionally and deliberately practice them in order for them to be part of your everyday life. So this is not meant to be a one and done program that after, the 12 weeks, it's going to be the magic fix, the magic pill. It's really what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. So we recommend that you pick a skill a day, a skill a week, and practice it and look back at your manual, come to our Family Connections alumni programming, get a reminder of the skills and continue to practice them. We want them to be part of your everyday life so that when a situation arises with your loved one, you have that toolkit, that toolbox that you can just pull out and start using a skill. And that's not going to happen just by happening. If you are not practicing validation and your loved one comes over for dinner and you need to validate them, you're not going to be able to do it. If you continually practice validation with your coworkers, like Brian mentioned, using the skills with people in the office, with the person when you're at the Target at Target at the checkout counter,
A
with
lot
your
of
friends, with
opportunity
your
to use
families.
skills in the
Yes.
world.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And that's what we encourage for you to practice the skill so that when it's needed in a moment of crisis or an alertness, it's in the back of your head and it becomes kind of like second nature. Oh, okay, I need to validate right now. I know how to do it. Not that I have to sit here thinking, okay, how do I validate? What am I going to say? What am I going to do? We want it to just become second nature that you can just do them, do the
Yeah.
skills.
And all of your resources and everything is on your website, correct? That's where everybody would find, and there's a lot of, I mean, it's like packed. That your website is really packed with resources,
Yes, so
right?
people
That's
can go
that's
on
the
our
best way to get.
Yes, people can go on our website. We have videos of all of the skills. We have videos of information that's kind of beyond family connection. So other skills that would be helpful. And we have a ton of resources for people to just go on the website and continue learning.
And this is where I think, when something feels too good to be true, it may not be too good to be true. And this is goes against that because I think this is like a unicorn program in a sense of really providing very comprehensive evidence-based resources in a way that is accessible, that is free, and that is right. Like there's nothing's behind a paywall, right? Like here, what you see is what you get. And I know as a clinician, I really appreciate all that you all do because, I've seen it firsthand really transform family members of my clients. And I really want to get the word out so that others can maybe debunk some of the myths around what it's like showing up into a group when you have some of what you're going through, when you're struggling with what you're going through, showing up in a group it can feel really intimidating and judgy and scary. And so we obviously as humans, we just don't do it, right? Because it's risky. And I think this program is set up to debunk those those risks and just be there to give permission, be okay not being okay, and provide hope.
We often have people who will reach out to us and say, I'm interested in taking the Zoom class that you offer, but I'm not going to turn my camera on, or I don't want to speak. And what we explain to the participants who are in this situation is you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And we do require people to be on camera. We do, ask that everybody share something, but some people start off very little. The age of my child, where I live, something very, very basic. But I think we always find by the end of class that the leaders and the other participants know the full story because I think as, Brian said earlier, or I don't remember who said it, by the leader sharing their stories and being so vulnerable, it really opens up a space where people feel comfortable sharing. And you're seeing from week to week that other people are getting the support and relationships are improving. And it's miraculous to me at class 12 or class 8 at the end where you can see how much progress some of the
Yeah,
people have made with their loved ones and with their families.
yeah.
And often they stay in touch after the classes because they've made these deep connections. They've talked to people who've been through similar things and they've, safely shared their stories with them. So they don't want that to end.
Yeah. And I think that is with this program, the difference of it being a theoretical model, right? Like a theoretical model is not necessarily going to resonate with parents as opposed to the personal shared experiences and the vulnerability that people are showing up with that help to move them through this really difficult time that they're going through.
One thing that I found interesting is Dr. Alan Frazzetti created this program along with Dr. Perry Hoffman, and Dr. Frazzetti has said to me that this program actually came out of a default. The idea originally was to have clinicians leading the Family Connections program, and they needed a control group and decided that the control group would be family members leading the program. And they saw that the family members had such a profound impact. And hearing the stories and sharing the stories, and as wonderful as Dr. Frazzetti is, he's a phenomenal educator and clinician and researcher. It always amazes me when we bring groups together and he's there presenting. I'll have people say to me, well, of course, Dr. Frazzetti can validate. Of course, he can do
Yeah.
radical acceptance. This is his job. It's very different when Brian or Krista or one of our other 200 leaders, gets up there and says, it's not my job to validate. I am not a therapist. I am just like you, just like any other family member. I go to work, I have a family, my job is an accountant or I'm a teacher or whatever I am. And through this program, I've learned the skills and I'm able to, to do this with my loved one and have improved my relationship. And I think that's the power of this program is that peer connection.
And the I understand has a whole new meaning, right? Like as opposed to a clinician saying, I understand how hard this is, or I understand what you're going through. Yes, no, maybe, right? But when it's coming from a lived experience and like I've been there, that I understand just has a totally different, it hits totally different.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you all would like to add about your respective programs or just NEABPD in general that we can share, both clinicians and family members?
I guess one is I like the concept of having to talk someone into family connections is foreign to me to a certain extent. But then I think about my own experience because my wife has not gone through the course. We've been together for 35 years. There's very, very few, if any, things that she ever lets me coach her on, but she did when she was having trouble. We worked on validation skills and then she would actually take coaching on it. So there's, if there is a reluctance for certain people, I think my wife would say something like, I'm just not that isn't the way I like to do things. I'm not, I don't want to do that. Um, at first I thought, well, this isn't right. I'm going to do all the work, and then and you're not there by my side. But that didn't last very long. Well, probably largely because I understood. I could observe the trauma and that she experienced without the benefit of family connections, and it was, I was concerned for her for doing that, but the fact that she must have seen how I could handle things, that she actually looked to me for advice about, texting or having a conversation with my daughter, and it made a difference for her. I think she'd say that too. And getting up, and taking the time that I take, 24 hours, over the course of 3 months to do that, she could rightfully say, "Hey, where you're spending all your time leading family connections courses," and she's never balked at any of that too. I think in appreciation of what she's observed herself.
Yeah. And I think, and I think what you all spoke on today helps to also set the framework of what the program is, as opposed to, like the clients and family members that I deal with, they've been through standard DBT and they've been through the more didactic teaching, right? Like that piece of it. And so when you think of a group, I think it's helpful to really understand what the makeup of that group is and what the function of that group is. Because if, yeah, you may say, what's the point of going to just sitting in a class, sitting in this? I've already maybe learned these, but the connection part is the piece that's different, right? And did you learn it in that way with the connections, right? I think connection is key in this and hope, with both leaders and the other participants.
Yeah, and we talked about loved ones before, but one of the in the evolution of me co-leading the classes, we've been more careful about expressing the term, loved one, and we usually say your person to be more neutral because we do encounter, although relatively rare, there are people that want, particularly I would say children with parents that are BPD, typically they might not characterize their relationship as being loved one,
Yeah.
but they don't want to walk away from their
Hmm.
family. They want to learn the skills so that they can be supportive of their brothers and sisters, their siblings, and also, they don't want to walk away from. They want to, just have a better relationship with their person.
Well, and I think that point really speaks to the strength of the program too, of just being aware and cognizant of like the nuances, right? And of the language that's even used that is more overall accepting and connecting and meeting people where they're at and recognizing where everybody's coming from. I think that speaks to the culture of, I think, NEA BPD in general and the family connections and the managing suicidality and trauma recovery program, because it does, right? Like the nuances are important in these moments, right? Like the language is really important. And so I
Yeah.
think that is huge to point out that that is recognized. And it's not just you're going to show up and, I think, with like standard DBT, right? Like you're showing up in a didactic group where you're having to share, you're having to learn, and then you're going home, sort of, right? Like there's not this true connecting point that really sets this aside.
I think there's the connection point. I think there's the support piece. And I think the other important aspect, I think the DBT clinicians will 100% recognize a lot of the skills that we teach, radical acceptance,
Yeah.
observing limits, validation. And we're not teaching it the same way that a DBT
Hmm.
clinician would be teaching it. We are teaching it with a twist for the family members, for them to understand, how to do the skill. And it's a little bit different than a typical DBT skills class or training where people are learning about it because we're taking that different angle
Yeah.
and that different approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And then,
intentionality.
one last thing I want to add, speaking to the point of the effectiveness of the program and just how it's structured is not that I ever needed any reinforcement about how good the class is, but I was particularly impressed when I had physicians and clinicians in the class, and I was like, wow, I'm, this must be really good if they're, and, if they had bailed out after the first couple of classes, I'd probably be questioning things a little bit, but no, I mean, they would stick through. And towards the end of the class, at the end of the class, we're also asked to identify people that could be potentially interested in being family connections leaders. And so we can help feed the pipeline that way too.
Yeah, and I would add, I think, Kim, you make an excellent point about the level of thoughtfulness that is going into the planning of these and implementation of these programs. I have never worked with anybody at NEABPD that didn't seem extremely professional, compassionate, empathetic, kind and gentle, and just really aware of how hard of a time this is for folks. The level of training that's required to be any kind of leader, I think, is wonderful. I think that what often you're suspicious of free services because, like you say, what's the catch, right? Too good to be true. Well, there must be something wrong here, but they don't slough at anything. They are really always working hard to make it better and paying attention to the results and what could we make a little bit better.
Hmm.
Um, and I think recent I just got an email that okay, this managing suicidality class that's going on right now, the breakout rooms could stand to be smaller. Can we get some more, breakout room leaders in? Because it's going to benefit the people in this class that's already started. They don't have to keep investing in that, right? They've already got these people, but they're thinking about the experience even as that program is going
Hmm.
on. And I think that just that level of attention and care is it's evident in everything that NEABPD is doing.
Well, I really appreciate you all taking the time and sharing this. I'm excited to get it out and to give more clarity on some of the points. And I'll direct everybody to the website. And is there typically is a wait list, but let's not let that deter people, correct?
Correct. So managing
Okay.
suicidality and trauma recovery, there is no wait list. We post the courses online and anybody can go on and click on those classes and get into them as soon as possible. Our Family Connections program, we do have a little bit of a wait list. It's about 3 to 5 months right now. We also have a wait list curriculum. So people who are on the wait list are going to be getting resources on a regular basis via email for them to practice a little bit, learn a little bit, engage a little bit, and really be ready for when the class begins.
So when you're on the wait list, you're not just sitting like, is somebody going to reach out to me or not reach out to me? Like there's like, wait lists that are just like floating out there.
You will receive regular emails from us with information that can help you along in your journey. So,
Well, thank you all. I really appreciate all that you do and please, from DBT-LBC, share with all of your leaders and connections that we really appreciate all the services that you are providing. I think it's beneficial for not only the family members, but also the clinicians to help with the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks,
Absolutely.
everybody.